the Champion people
Okay, now we're rolling again.
were really up against the horsepower race. And and there's a really good article in the Antique Outboarder about.
So they had a lot of money into this Champion. They'd made a commitment to the market because they were using injection molding.
Yes,
And now they had a motor that was
not big
basically not big enough.
Right.
Right.
right, trying to keep up with the competition.
They-
And so quickly they said, well, what do we do? What do we do? Well, let's just put two together and call them the Tandem 33. Well, that wasn't a solution to the problem at all.
An aside on this engine right here is it's a spring drive.
Yeah,
And it's about as screwy as the hydro drive on the Champion down there, the dual and single cylinders. It's very complicated, and it doesn't really work all that well. And they made a Firestone model, which all the engineers used at the factory, because it was a straight shift.
Yeah.
Unlike this thing with the spring.
Yeah.
So I think the motor was slightly unworkable as well.
okay.
I mean, that's my own personal opinion as
Yeah.
an outboard
Yeah,
mechanic.
probably compared to one of these.
Oh,
It's
but that Evinrude down here puts out massive horsepower, has a full gear shift that works 100%,
Right.
starts very easily. This thing has spring drive and it goes into gear very suddenly. It's hard to start. It's not what I'd call a user's dream.
So Champion was up against, okay, what do we do next? And I believe they prototyped some four-cylinder versions of this and had some prototypes working. And the story, indicates that they looked at the cost to get to the next level, and they just said, never mind, we're going out of business, it's easier. So that was the
Gotcha.
end of Champion.
Right.
But I also want to talk a little bit about anti-casting.
Okay.
So we're going to go back to the 30s, and again, this horrible sand process, which is so tempting because it's so quick, but it's so dirty, it's so messy. We're going to go over and talk about this. So this one's a Sea King, but it's still made by
This was the ones that Key Caver put together to make the
Okay.
bid with Montgomery Ward.
Yeah.
It was a Thor, but he
Right.
made them so they work.
So this guy
So-
named Thorwald Hansen, I guess, came from a metal stampings background. He was really good at metal stampings.
He was head of metal stampings at General Motors.
Okay, so there we
I
go.
just learned that the other night.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
So anyway, so now we're in the middle 30s. The economy's not so good. People aren't spending a lot of money on outboards. And he thought that he could make a really low-cost outboard and a very rugged outboard with metal stampings instead of castings. So he designed these parts with as much metal stamping as possible. Even this crankcase is a metal stamping, actually with a flange welded on. You can see the stampings and the two halves put together. A cast iron cylinder. He couldn't work his way around that casting. Okay, so he probably didn't do it at his shop. He probably farmed those. He went to some foundry, and there's an indicator right here of maybe the foundry that cast that for him. But anyway, he stayed with as much metal stamping as possible, and I think to some success. I mean, he made an outboard that's
The
very
Sea
few
King
castings.
runs.
Yeah.
That thing has about a 60 RPM limit. This is the Thor.
okay.
This is the first year. This is the first year he made it.
Okay.
It's really almost a non-working engine. I mean, I spent a long time trying to get that thing running. There is a video of that up on YouTube going
Right.
on a boat.
All right.
But
Anyway, that was his method of trying to get away from castings in general, and it kind of made sense. But certainly the outboards aren't very glamorous to look at. I mean, they're very, but they're utilitarian, and that's he felt that there was a market for inexpensive, good running outboard motor for fishermen. So the next I guess the last segment we could talk about are mercuries, and now that's not my area of expertise. Lincoln's already talked about. In fact, I'm wondering if I should take the camera and you're gonna talk.
Ask me questions.
Yeah, it's okay, so we already talked about this a little bit, but Mercury also thought about time to market.
Yes, they very much did.
And this great,
This is the KF9.
KF9.
First four-cylinder, went through a lot of
Yeah,
promise and whatnot.
right,
After World War was promised, before World War II, that looked like horizontally opposed four, and that didn't work out. And so after the war, 1946, they kept promising it, and it had some other, there were some actually made, some prototypes made of horizontally opposed four, like the Elto, except running back fore and aft instead
Right.
of side to side. But this thing is all sand cast.
yeah. That was-
Internally, everything on it pretty much is sand
Right.
cast, with a few exceptions. I think these clamps were. But that wasn't their first successful engine. This engine right here is based on the KE7 right here, which is also all sand cast, and that's the first 10 horsepower. And that one is the one that won. It went in the guy named Del Seymour was the only Mercury entered in the Hudson River race in 1947. Carl Kike was furious when he found out about it. This engine cleaned up its class, won its class, and beat most of the C class too.
Right. Yeah, the old Speedy,
And
opposed
the
twin
next
Speedy
year-
twins.
Better than 50% of the outboards in that race, which was the premier race, were this engine, and then that one came along the next year
Right.
and changed the face of racing. But they were all sandcast, time to
Right.
market.
Time to market.
Quick.
So he got in at the right time. When demand for good outboards was very high, he jumped in with a product.
This was his entry into the racing world, and that moved him from a 6% marketplace with engines like that one right there. That's
Yeah.
a Wizard, but it was exactly the same as the KD4. This is a pre-war version of that engine. It's quite different, solid bearings and stuff. That one's all needle bearing. It's a hot engine, but it runs good. It starts well, it runs good. The KE4, which is this engine right here, really is identical.
So that's what they call the rocket.
And that's a and it's a die cast outer water jacket. The cylinder is inside of here, and they're screwed together instead of being cast. Is with a water jacket. The water jacket's actually screwed on, and it's aluminum. So
And this appears to be sand cast.
Yes. Yeah, so a lot of it was sand cast. This one is too as well. That's also very rough. It's a sand casting.
So, but let's
So we went from sand casting, when we had a very successful four-cylinder, the marketplace, when Johnson, it looked like people wanted full gear shifts. When Johnson and Scott Atwater came out with a full gear shift at 47, 48, obviously the name of the game was we've got to have an engine that could sell to the general public. So they came out with this Mark 50, still sand cast, a lot of it, but the Mark 55, which came out in 1955, was, with a few exceptions, totally die cast. And it was a very successful engine for Mercury.
right. So that was kind of an evolution. That was a nice balance of good marketing to get into the market,
Yes.
even if we needed sand casting, which probably from a higher volume doesn't make as much money. But he got in, people liked the products. It grew the business so that he could have confidence to invest the money to have more die casting.
Right.
Right.
Mark 20,
Yeah.
Mark 25 down there, they're all die cast. Everything about them. And then these little ones, the fishing motors. And then you have right here, the KF5 right there, and that's Waterman running a KF5. And that was part of that ad at the New York Boat Show.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we've covered it.
Good. You've done a great job, Bill.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks.